all good things must come to an end, and today is a very sad day. One of the greatest RPG developers of all time may be shutting their doors. It's pretty much all but confirmed outside an official announcement. It is quite sad, and that developer is Piranha Bytes. Now, if you haven't heard of them, they're not exactly industry titans. They're not in the mainstream, but they are the developers of Gothic. That is their most acclaimed, most successful series, an open-world third-person RPG series from the early 2000s, and then they did Risen, and more recently the Elex games, which some people might have heard of if you don't know some of those older titles. Now, for me personally, their highs are absolutely incredible. The first two Gothic games are some of my favorites of all time, and this isn't just nostalgia goggles. I only played the Gothic series for the first time when I was probably sort of 2021, which was around 9 or 10 years ago. So I didn't play them as a kid, and I'm just thinking they're still great. I'm living in my memories. I played them years after they came out, and I very much appreciated them. They changed how I looked at open world games. I could never play a Ubisoft title or one of the modern open worlds and look at it the same way. It kind of changed gaming for me, like maybe Baldur's Gate 3 has for many people these days. I love the Gothics, and so I've always had a soft spot for Piranha Bytes. Now, the history, if we look at some of those games that they've had, essentially Piranha Bytes had Gothic 1 and 2 that are classics. They were quite successful, especially in Europe. They never really caught on the same way in the West, but I think over the years more people have found the Gothic games and they do appreciate them. Now, unfortunately, after Gothic 1 and 2, they released Gothic 3, which was very polarizing at best. It wasn't like the first two games. It didn't do so well, and then their publisher, I believe, basically took the IP off them and gave it to a developer who were way more incompetent than Piranha Bytes ever were. So the Gothic IP, it wasn't in a great place, but Piranha Bytes moved on to a new series, Risen, which was essentially Gothic, but just reskinned. It was very similar, the same essence. It just obviously had a different name and a bit of a different tone and things as well. But Risen 1, it essentially played the same way. I'm not even sure why Risen 1 isn't on the Steam listings. Maybe it's some sort of weird publisher thing. Who knows these days? But you've got Risen 1. Risen 2 and 3 were not so great, but then we got Elex, which brings us to sort of the modern era. And I really enjoyed Elex 1. It was a return to form for sure for Piranha Bytes. The caveat there was, it wasn't a perfect game. However, it really felt like if they built on it, then future titles from them could be something very special, and we can get back to the golden era, the golden age of Piranha Bytes. Sadly, with Elex 2, which came out last year, it wasn't the case. It just didn't seem to have the same passion. It was like more of the same, but worse. I only actually played it for a few hours, and then I put it to the side. I thought, yeah, look, I'll come back to this maybe after some patches, and I just never really did. Whereas with Elex 1, I played it all the way through without any breaks, really. I played it for 70 plus hours. It was a ton of fun. It had those old school vibes. There was this awesome city. It was like a city with a dome covering it, and it was like a really old school CRPG city like you'd find in the original Fallout, Baldur's Gate, that sort of thing. I had tons of fun with it. I thought we were going to get more, but now it seems like Piranha Bytes' doors are closing, and this all started with a rumor because, again, there hasn't been an official announcement, but just about all signs point to it being true. It's not a vague rumor, it seems to be the case. So because Piranha Bytes are a German studio, a lot of the news that comes out isn't in English first. So you sort of pick up little pieces, little tidbits from German news sites. And we've got here, in this Reddit post, what is going on at Piranha Bytes? Are they in financial trouble? Now, this isn't just a random Reddit post. It does have sources, which we'll go through. And essentially, we can see here that a German games podcast with good connections to the industry released an episode basically confirming that Piranha Bytes is on the verge of closure, which is very sad. Again, this studio has not been perfect. What they've done recently, most recently in Elex 2, hasn't been great, but I thought, yeah, they might continue on. Maybe they'll learn some lessons and they'll bring it back in the next game. They've had these comeback stories. They've never just been on a consistent decline, really, without making that comeback. So there was always the chance that they would come good again, like I felt they did with Elex 1. Now we can see here, Bjorn Pankratz already left the studio last year due to differences with the team. The team wanted to make a new Gothic game, but Bjorn wasn't open to the idea because he had mentally moved on, as Elex was his new baby. Now Bjorn is, I believe, one of the last people, at least one of the more senior people, who was at Piranha Bytes during Gothic 2 and is still there now. I assume just about everyone else is different developers who've joined them from over the years. So while Bjorn was there, because he was there for, in my opinion, their best ever game, Gothic 2, you felt like something special could happen while he was at the helm. He was sort of picking up that magic back 20 years ago when Gothic 2 was a thing. So I always had some faith. But he obviously left, which is a little bit weird. I'll explain why in a second. But it seems like the team actually wanted to make a new Gothic, a new entry in their best ever series, and Bjorn didn't want to. He wanted to continue with Elex, and it seems like he had passion, but that didn't really come out in the game, and I just wonder if he was kind of forcing the team to continue with Elex, and they didn't want to, and they maybe had access to Gothic, because Embracer Group, who owns Piranha Bytes, they're like THQ Nordic, they've been closing studios left and right. Another reason that it just feels like this will be true, they own the Gothic IP as well, which Piranha Bytes were without for such a long time, so maybe they were offered the choice to make a new Gothic game, but Bjorn didn't want to, and if that is true, then it might be that the team was just feeling passionless, and that is why Elex 2 just doesn't feel that great. It feels a bit lazy. It doesn't really have that same magic. I don't want to throw Bjorn under the bus. This might not be true, this specific part, and given he was there in the heyday of Piranha Bytes, Elex 1 was quite good. I don't want to just sort of trash him based on this one rumor. He may be a great developer. We don't really know what happened behind the scenes, so no shade on him, but it could be the case that the rest of the team didn't want to work on Elex 2. That's why it went the way it did, and just those creative differences just could have led to a bad environment, regardless of if anyone was actually at fault. We can see in the next point, Piranha Bytes is on the verge of closure after 25 plus years. The process has probably been running since November 23rd. And what's interesting there is I read somewhere else that Bjorn left in November 2023, but it was for creative differences. It wasn't necessarily because the studio was closing. It seems odd that that would just be a coincidence. I imagine maybe Embracer were on the fence about closing Piranha Bytes, and then after Bjorn left, they sort of thought, well, this studio doesn't really have a leader, someone with the history. Now's probably the time to close the doors. It feels like the timing is right. That could be it, or maybe Bjorn also saw the writing on the wall and just sort of jumped ship because the walls were closing in. The reason is the drastic cost-cutting course of the Embracer Group. As we know, they've already closed the Saints Row studio, the Time Splitters one, many others. Any game in an early state of development where it is unclear whether it will be profitable upon release will be cancelled. And that does put Piranha Bytes in a really bad place, because not only was Elex 2 worse, I feel, than Elex 1, it also is less commercially successful. Those sorts of games, these niche RPGs, AA, not AAA, sort of big budget titles, they really rely on word of mouth. They're never going to have huge marketing budgets. And Elex 2 just underwhelmed. No one was excited for it. No one was really saying very positive things. And that's part of the reason why I shelved it. It's hard to really press on when you're sort of not feeling it and you think, you know what, I'm just going to sort of hold off. Maybe they'll patch it, all of that sort of stuff. So Elex 2 did not sell well. And if Embracer Group were concerned, I mean, we've heard that Piranha Bytes were making an Elex 3. That's what they were working on. This goes into it in a second, which I'll show you. But if they're looking for an easy target, a studio that has shipped a game a year ago, they're probably going to take another 3, 4, 5 years to make the next one, and it doesn't look likely it's going to be a success. It kind of makes sense that these guys would be ones to go. Even though I really hate it, even though I love this studio, you can just sort of see the writing on the wall there. It does mention THQ Nordic is not to blame. They have stood up for Piranha Bytes against the Embracer Group. Now, I see that all as pretty much one and the same. I thought THQ Nordic was Embracer Group, so maybe I'm a little bit off there. At the end of the day, it is the publisher who's closing them down. So the logistics, I mean, who really cares? Embracer Group, Nordic, whatever, they're closing down Piranha Bytes. That seems to be what's happening. There is currently a grace period from the Embracer Group, which gives the team the opportunity to pitch Elex 3 to other publishers. Now, Again, not really a great situation. They might have done some work on Elex 3. Who knows if they can even use that work or if that's still owned by Embracer Group, if they have to start again. But that maybe Embracer Group is letting them keep the IP, some sort of deal. It's just not a great situation because Elex 2, it's a financial failure, and it's not like a Vampire Bloodlines where it's got a cult following, but the mainstream just didn't catch on to it. Elex 2 just isn't seen that great by anyone, really. There's just apathy for it. It's not the worst game ever, but it's not really great, and it probably needed to be to really kickstart it and really build on Elex 1. So if they're shipping it around to publishers, is there a lot to get excited about? I mean, Bjorn's not even there anymore, and he seemed to be the one who was most passionate about Elex. Everyone else wanted to move on to Gothic. So it seems like people just wanting to save their jobs, which is fair enough, but I don't think it's going to save them to walk around with an Elex 3 and try and sell that. I think it's just not going to happen. It's probably going to be the end. It does mention all staff have already been laid off, which is pretty sad again. I think they had something like 35 or 40 employees, so they're not the biggest outfit in the world, but there are some devs there who are clearly talented if they at least worked on Elex 1, so hopefully something can come out of that. All we really want, we don't care about Elex as an IP, I'm going to be honest. It's just about having a game that has that Gothic DNA. That's what people like. Fortunately, we have gotten some mods over the years. There's an incredible one, for instance, which is this, the Chronicles of Piranha Arcolis. And this, for all intent and purposes, is basically Gothic 3. It feels like Gothic 1 and 2. It's made on the same engine. Again, it is a mod. If you're looking for Gothic 3, that true experience, this is it. It's got overwhelmingly positive reviews, 13,000 plus reviews. It's a 10 out of 10, 98%. It's fantastic. So if this is bad news, this could cheer you up if you haven't played this yet. And even if you have, I played and enjoyed it last year. It was fantastic. Probably the best RPG I played all year. The good news would be is that we know that developers out there can do the same thing, whether it's fans or another studio. Maybe one day we get a Gothic-like like this again, whether it's another mod or a genuine new sort of game in the professional gaming space. If we continue with this, it does mention many things are still unclear, e.g. the question of whether Piranha Bytes will be allowed to keep the rights to the Elex series, or if the studio can keep the German government fund of 3 million. Now, that's something that went around, that the German government gave them money. I'm not sure how far 3 million goes in game development. I mean, it's in Germany, the team's not massive, maybe that does help a lot, but again, without a publisher, I don't think anything is really going to happen, and I don't care so much about Elex, I just want more games similar to Gothic most of all. So whether they keep the rights to Elex or not, that is not something I'm so worried about. It's whether we can get a group of developers who are talented to make a new game, and maybe these guys could do it if they were allowed to stick together. Once more, I just want to mention, Bjorn left. He wanted to make Elex, but the original team wanted to make new Gothic games, which is a nice thing. Hopefully something like that can happen from this team or another. There was actually an update here as well from earlier today, and this is probably even worse news. It mentions that Piranha Bytes will almost certainly be shut down. All employees have been given notice, as in fired, and the current Piranha Bytes team is preparing a pitch for possible other publishers. This has also been backed up by a number of German gaming sites, whether they're all just referring to the podcast or they've got their own individual sources. I don't really know, but there's a lot here, including, say, the Piranha Bytes website being semi-down. If you go to the website, you can see it's non-existent. There were some people saying, oh, they might be updating the website with some new information, but let's be real, is that really going to be happening for a small AA gaming company? Probably not, and most people kind of say you don't have to bring down the whole website to do some improvements. This site has been down like this 4 days. What I mentioned earlier about the 3 million from the German government, now that was to fund a title called Wiki 6. That was the code name on some sort of government website, that scheme where they were sort of giving that money to different German developers, presumably. Apparently that project was removed from the German government's website, essentially, so it's no longer there. I've seen a rumor that it's back under a different name. Maybe that gives some hope to people, but I don't really know if that is true. It could just be a little bit of coping. The short of it is, it was there, then it got removed for some reason. So it was just more evidence to suggest maybe the game has been canned and the studio has been canned. And the last, I suppose, evidence around that is the YouTube channel for Piranha Bytes. It was super active. They were posting all the time. A lot of it was in German, so if you don't understand it like me, you couldn't really watch and see what was going on. But they were posting very regularly. But then in November, that basically completely stopped. And as we know, Bjorn left around then. He was very prominent in the videos. So was his wife, who does or did work there. And basically everything is suggesting that the studio is about to close down. And the icing, or I guess the mold on the cake, is that Embracer is just shutting down pretty much any studio that's not immediately profitable. They don't have a game coming soon, or they don't have supreme confidence in the studios to generate money. And Piranha Bytes, I don't think they've ever really been a massive moneymaker. So with all of that going on, they just would have seemed like easy targets. But I do have to say, just seeing this news when I first saw it, it really bummed me out. The idea that we're not going to see the Piranha Bytes logo on a game again. I'm never going to be able to boot up a new one of their games, because even if Elex 2 didn't excite me, I put it down. I always thought I'd be able to come back to it. I'd be able to check it out, and maybe it would surprise me. I thought they could redeem themselves with the new game. It doesn't seem like that's going to happen. And the only positive that could maybe come out of it is, as we know, there were creative differences in the teams. Maybe some of those people on either side, they start new studios. Maybe they make their own versions of what Gothic was all those years ago, and we get more games like Gothic because of it, and maybe the teams are more passionate because both groups are working on what they really want to do. And I think there's good things in Elex, there's obviously good things in the Gothics, maybe something could happen there. But at the end of the day, it sucks, and I just can't stand Embracer Group, because I don't want to sound like I'm wearing a tinfoil hat, but something just seems to be going on where I have to wonder, are Embracer working for the Microsofts of the world? And did they go around and buy up basically every indie AA studio they could get their hands on, every old IP, run themselves into the ground, and now they're basically killing all these studios, but they retain the IPs for the most part, that are going to sit there dormant, nothing's going to happen with them? And I say that because the only real threat to the AAA industry is indie titles, smaller titles from passionate teams who actually put effort into games and want to make them fun. They don't just want to make them fleecing cash grabs conveyor belts. And if gamers play these sorts of titles that do have that passion, that love put into them, they see that gaming can be something more. So my tinfoil hat theory is Embracer did this on orders of a Microsoft, a huge gaming company, to basically ruin that part of the industry, those smaller developers who make maybe not super polished, super graphic intensive games, but they make nice ones that people who want a certain experience can enjoy. And that's exactly what the Gothic series, Elex, to some extent was. It was a different type of game. You can't just find something else like it. If you look online and go, I want to play a Gothic-like, what else is out there? People will say, oh, play Skyrim, play something similar. Those games are absolutely nothing like Gothic. We're not going to see anything like that again, perhaps, but maybe we will, given we've had some great fan projects. And I want to say, lastly, something I've seen doing the rounds is, what about Warhorse, the studio behind Kingdom Come Deliverance? It's another great RPG title, and Warhorse are owned by Embracer Group as well, so what's going on there? I think that's going to be a little bit different. Given the fact that Warhorse released Kingdom Come years ago, you would think a sequel's not that far away, and it probably wouldn't make logical sense for Embracer to kill it when it's coming soon and they need cash. And Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 has a chance to be a success, given the first was great. If they can build on that, if they can keep going, then it should sell really well, especially with the state Bethesda are in. People aren't that excited about Elder Scrolls 6, maybe compared to what they were before Starfield. So I think Deliverance 2 could have a fair bit of hype for it if it's looking good. And so I don't think Embracer will touch that. They need a cash injection. It doesn't make sense to axe a game that is likely going to do very well for them in the near future. But I want to say again, it's very sad about Piranha Bytes. I hope the developers land on their feet, perhaps form new studios that can carry on the Gothic legacy in some way, and I'll be looking out for them. In the meantime, I'm going to mourn what's happened to Piranha Bytes, but in the meantime, I'm going to put out a candle for them, and perhaps I'll replay one of the classic Gothic games in their honor. Thanks so much for listening. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers. Bye.